Someone impersonating a police officer? A few years back, I was driving home after taking my dad to the airport for a late flight. It was already dark when I left the airport and I still had a 3-hour drive home. A few hours into the drive, I get recalculated to some windy backroad highway. There were no cars or streetlights, and so it was a pretty dark and creepy road. As I turned a curve, I noticed a black car come out of nowhere and start to ride my bumper. Then the blue lights. The road was so dark I had to drive for a minute to find a spot with at least a few small lights where I could pull over. The officer came up to my window and asked me if I knew that my tags were expired. I thought it was kind of odd because I was driving my mom's car and she's usually pretty on top of things like that. But it was more so the way he talked that made me uneasy. He was speaking pretty fast, like he was in a hurry or something. As he's standing at my window, before he even gets my license registration, his radio beeps and he tells me that he has to go on another call. He practically runs back to the car and speeds off. I head back home half weirded out, half thanking God that I didn't get a ticket. I kind of brush it off until I go outside to my car the next day and find that my tags were not due to expire for 2 more months. It could have been a simple mistake, but I couldn't help recalling how weird the whole incident was. He could have misread the number, but looking back I wonder what could have happened if he was someone with bad intentions. From then on, I pull over only in well-populated areas, and if a safe option is unavailable, call 911 to make them aware. Strange lady outside the entrance to my apartment building. I work on shift, so 1 week I'll be doing early shift and the other is late shift. The area I live in is known for being pretty rough, and it's common to have sex workers lurking around, and I have been propositioned many times. Also see loads of meth heads about too, especially at night. But one time was strange. I finished work at 11 p.m. and took the 15-minute drive home. When I arrived, I parked my car on the street as normal, having to parallel park between 2 cars. Once I was parked up and just before I switched the car off, I noticed a lady run across the road to the entrance of the building where my apartment is. She then just stood there staring directly at me in my car, without moving or looking away. She was like this for about 2 minutes. Since I still had my car on, I decided to leave the parking space and proceed to park on the opposite side of the building where there is a second entrance. As I drove past her standing at the entrance, she was watching me and didn't even take her eyes off me until I was out of sight. I got in the other entrance safely and not sure where she went after this. My thoughts are this. How did she know I was heading for that entrance? Why did she wait for me there? Was she trying to get the code to unlock the doors so she can get in the future? Did she have an accomplice hiding around the corner? Did she just want some business? This hasn't happened since, but I think about it regularly and wonder what would have happened if I had got out the car and used that entrance as normal. Ceiling Walker. It's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's perspective on it as well. She just doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I lived in a mid-sized city in the southern United States, where the main thing to do at the time was go to the mall. Sure, we had movie theaters and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that, there really wasn't much to the city. My mom worked at a department store located in the mall, and, having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out of the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in the food court. Honestly, though, I was shy and preferred to just stay cooped up in the break room, playing video games on my Nintendo 3DS. My mom's coworkers were generally very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or just to check on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mom on weekends, I could usually convince my mom to pick up my friend. We were actually dating, but since we were both girls, I didn't want that to get out, to go along with us. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak a secret date in every now and then. My girlfriend, though, never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did, so I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her to just walk over to a nearby store and look around or to go grab something from the food court rather than walking. But I noticed pretty quickly that she wasn't trying to actually get me to walk around, she just didn't want to be in the break room. Now, my girlfriend was more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambience of the break room for some reason. For a little while, I let it go, but eventually, I got frustrated and asked directly what was really bothering her about the break room. I thought she was going to tell me that it was too cramped or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy, the things that bothered me about it too, but no. What she told me was that she heard things in the ceiling, like someone was walking around in there. I had learned from my mother that there was a room in the ceiling, but it wasn't for walking around, it was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation, but, technically, someone could go up there, so I told my girlfriend this and said it was likely an employee up there to fix stuff. She said that was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication and, though I got frustrated, I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling. Though, my mom just looked distressed and said they hadn't been up there fixing anything that day, but she wanted me to see something. My mom took me into the receiving room of the department store, which was just a room off in the back filled with boxes and random junk the store was going to put out for sale. The layout of this room, though, was sort of an L shape. One part of the L was used for receiving, but the other part was the way into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb in there, as it would have been a safety hazard. The only thing that this particular area had was a hatch that led into the ceiling, that was it. So needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be claw marks leading up the wall to the hatch. I still remember the way they looked, brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mom if it was a prank, but she told me that this wasn't the first time it had happened, and she had no way of knowing I would even ask about it. According to her, these weird carvings had shown up several times over the course of a few months. Each time, the store would call in the mall security and maintenance teams, who would clean the wall up and then go into the ceiling to investigate. Nothing had ever come of their searches, though, and they eventually gave up dealing with the marks. The only explanation mall security could give was that it was likely a homeless individual who had made their way into the ceiling by sheer willpower and happened to be very good at hiding during the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mom after that, and any time I wanted my girlfriend to come over, we found somewhere else to go during the day. Sometimes she'd just come over to my house and we'd watch TV or whatever, but I didn't feel safe going back to the break room after that. I knew nothing had happened up until that point, but I just didn't want to risk it, honestly. So, to whoever was walking around in the ceiling at my mom's workplace, let's not meet.